it's all about. 'Cause I've been there and I'm glad I'm out.
Out of those chains that bind you.
That is why I'm here to remind you. What do you get when you fall in love? You only get lies and pain and sorrow. So for at least until tomorrow, I'll never fall in love again. I'll never fall in love again.
Out of those chains that bind you.
That is why I'm here to remind you. What do you get when you fall in love? You only get lies with pain and sorrow. So for at least until tomorrow, I'll never fall in love again. I'll never fall in love again. I'll never fall in love
Now on to our first speaker. And I want you to be very kind to Alan Bugbee tonight. Alan was a last-minute replacement. Somebody couldn't come tonight, and Alan was asked at the very last minute to come in. And I'll tell you a little bit about Alan. Alan has been a Simsbury resident for 59 years. He graduated from Bowdoin College. Can you still hear me fine? Just put up hands if you can. In the United States Navy as a gunner's mate during World War II. He then spent more than 40 years traveling and selling advertising space for Machine Design magazine. He has been a woodworking hobbyist for most of his life and hand-built a 24 by 48-foot workshop in the woods behind his house that is full of machinery he picked up at industrial auctions for years. He also has collected more than 4,500 samples of wood from around the world. He is a member of the New England Model Engineers Society, the Ornamental Turners International, and the International Wood Collectors Society, and he's a member of something else, but since I haven't put my glasses on yet, what have I missed? There's one society. Society of Ornamental Turners. Correct that mistake. Now, I must say one thing before Warren comes up here. Warren is a repeat. Warren was here last year, and he was also, being a bee, he was the first speaker. And when I've known Warren for years. Alan. Not as well as I thought I did. Okay. And last year, I know his passion for wood and for woodworking. And when the program started out, he had a book this big about oak. I could see the word oak. And I was in the back of the room, and I thought, oh, wow, all this about oak. It turned out to be my favorite one of the whole night. I loved it, Alan. He talked about acorns, and something I didn't know. At one time, acorns were ground into flour and fed the world. It was all brand new to me. I bored everybody for weeks, Alan. I'd say, did you know about acorns? Let me tell you. And so without further ado, please welcome Alan Bugbee.
Thank you, Eunice. Does this work? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Alan, I just have to get, it's over there, get over there. Just have to get my 5-minute sign.
Oh.
Go.
I was out in my workshop, and Nancy came out and said, one of our readers just canceled. Can you do something? So I shook most of the sawdust off, and here I am in workshop clothes. But I volunteer here at the library shelving books. I love books, and I do it because I'm always looking for unusual things to read. And my oldest boy and his wife have been sending unusual books for Christmas and birthdays for years, and I literally have a bookshelf full of strange books. The most recent, Oyster, A World History. That's odd enough, so I thought I got to read this. So. The first chapter says, "In the beginning." The oyster is older than us, older than grass. It was here at the start of civilization, at the start of the world. Oysters are found in the late Paleozoic. They were abundant in Jurassic and Cretaceous periods. To put numbers on that, the Paleozoic was 542 to 251 million years ago. They were found in the Cambrian period, 545 million years ago. The Paleozoic is what science refers to as the start of visible life. By any criteria, the oyster is an extraordinary survivor. Scientists trying to date the earliest known humanoid skeletons discovered at Kibish in Ethiopia in 1987 used the oyster shells that were buried in the volcanic ash with them to set a date around 195,000 years ago. Before men were men, oysters were oysters. Oyster fossils can be seen in Portland stone in Dorset, England, which formed in the Jurassic period. In Peru, giant oyster shells have been found 2 miles above sea level. Whatever the precise numbers, oysters have been around for a very, very long time. Prehistoric kitchen middens have been uncovered around the world, and some of them are unbelievable. In Brittany, in France, the shell banks of oysters are 700 yards long, 300 yards wide, and they're 15 feet deep. That's a lot of oysters. The discovery of a fossil reef in Africa's Red Sea coast in 2000 showed that early humans had taken up their coastal life at least 10,000 years earlier than previously believed. Now, in every civilization, there's some prehistory of gods, of legends, of larger-than-life ancestors, of indeterminate, ghostly pre-life. The oyster has always managed to associate with such illustrious company. Gods, mighty warriors, heroes, beautiful women, fearsome, lithe, fire-breathing creatures, fantastical epics, glorious kings and queens. The oyster has been an iconic must-have in the myths of great wealth and devil-fearing. In different manifestations, whatever religion, whatever part of the world, whatever century, even whoever is telling the story, oysters were in essence an idea, and that idea is most potent with the miracle of the pearl. Revered across millennia, continents, and cultures, the pearl has enjoyed the ultimate social status, notwithstanding, or possibly because of the enormous cruelty and endeavor associated with its discovery and gathering. Of almost equal significance, and in some cases value, has been the mother of pearl, from which it is formed. And somewhere in the book, They have found mother-of-pearl jewelry in Egyptian tombs, in Aztec tombs. They literally found them all over the world. Gold and silver were of secondary value in the ancient world. It was not until around the 1400s that craftsmen learned how to cut other gems, so the natural pearl was without rival in value. In the Bible, the gates of heaven are each made from a single pearl, the pearly gates. In Genesis, God gives Adam and Eve coats as beautiful as pearls. And a brief paragraph on the biology of oysters. Many things set the oyster apart from other creatures. Most living things are symmetrical. We have 2 arms, 2 legs. Fish are perfectly aligned, left to right. Birds have 2 wings. Even most other bivalves have shells that are neatly, roughly equal in size, not the oyster. The 2 sides of an oyster shell are completely different. The top shell is flat. The lower side is cupped and sagged because of all the, I don't know what this term means, concholian. I guess it's what becomes mother of pearl. Even if they choose to grow vertically as well as horizontally, the effect is the same. The oyster is one stable creature in an otherwise completely changing estuary environment. And the final paragraph, to early man, the oyster has other virtues. It was portable. Bagged up, it could hang off the side of a boat and travel to sea or back home again. Closed up in the shell, the meat stayed fresh and succulent for days. It was wholesome, nutritious food, too, full of energy-giving minerals, calcium for bones, and vitamins that the early diet would have lacked so badly, a source of nutrition far and away superior to anything else available to wandering Neolithic families. That's just a tiny sampling of a fascinating book. Thank you.
Not much, not much. Alan, you have done for oysters what you did for acorns. And you were every bit as good as Warren, I remember. Thank you so much, Alan. And our next person, I have to little plug for the Friends projects. There's a shop around the corner. You're all aware that we sell secondhand books all year round. And it's anybody that doesn't know where it is, you just come out this door, take a right, take a left. It's just before you go into the children's library. And you should treat it exactly the way you treat Marshall's, because you go in there some days, won't be anything you're even close to wanting, another day there'll be everything you want. So just make it a habit every time you come into the library to go in there. Very, very economical book buying. It isn't a big fun thing for us, but every little bit helps. And our next guest has been library director in Simsbury for 16 years and a librarian for 40 years. Sue holds a BA from Vassar College and a Master of Library Science from Southern Connecticut State University. She served as the president of the Connecticut Library Association and the LCI, the Capital Region Consortium of Libraries, to which we belong. She co-founded the Meriden Hispanic Foundation and the Theropodist International of Farmington Valley. Sue has lived on 4 continents and now makes her home in Towin, Massachusetts. Want to take a guess at the population? 489. Sue has 3 sons and 1 grandson. Her favorite escape is reading Regency novels. So many people in this room that contributed to making the library what it is today. I couldn't even begin to start to point everybody out. But nobody contributed more than this lady right here. She had the vision. We had the right leader at the right time, and with failed referendums and negativity around people saying, no money, no money, no money, no money, she never gave up on the vision. And so it's a great honor to introduce to you Sue Bullock.
All right. I am going to Women by Louisa May Alcott. Now, I have with me the book in 3 iterations. This one was the first Little Women that I knew. It was in Spanish because at the time I was living in Argentina. This book is 60 years old, and it's one of the few possessions my mother packed away to come to the U.S. I have here also one of the well-worn books in the children's department. This one is in English. And on my trusty iPad, I have, let's see, opening Kindle, and here is Little Women. So Little Women is with me wherever I go. I'll tell you why I chose Little Women. And I wrote this down so I wouldn't go over. I first heard Little Women when I was 5 years old. My mother would ask my sister to read it aloud to us. My father bought this book in the city. We lived in the provinces in Argentina. There were no books there. My sister Kathy would read it aloud, and the book was in Spanish, but she would translate it into Hungarian because that's what my mother knew, and she did not know any Spanish. So here is a great deal of thanks to all translators. Most of the classics have been translated into every language, and without translators, we would not know them. So thank you, translators, wherever you are. You should get a Pulitzer. This book changed my mother's life, and therefore it changed mine. My mother was raised in post-World War I Hungary, and she was one of 3 children. Her mother was a widow, and my grandma worked morning and night to feed the kids. So there was no father and no mother in sight. She grew up in a very violent world where disciplining children consisted of beating, kicking, and threatening, and the like. And so that was my mother's experience. And she grew up, she had, I did have a father, obviously, and he was the exact opposite of my mother. He was very gentle and kind. He had grown up in a higher socioeconomic group, and he had both parents. And so I remember as a child that my mother and father would have bitter arguments on how to raise the children. Now, my mother and father had many disagreements about it, but then my mother was introduced to Marmee in Little Women. Marmee is the mother figure in Little Women. Marmee became her role model. She quoted Marmee like others quote the Bible. She learned from Marmee that children deserve respect from their parents. This concept was so foreign to her that her incredulity knew no bounds. I remember her exclaiming, "Respect, respect. Who ever heard of respecting a kid?" But because of Marmee, she started listening to my father and moderating her rages. We used to call her Attila the Hun. I inherited my mother's temper, so I know what it cost her to control her temper. And I learned from her. Now, let me give you the story preceding the passage I will read. Jo, who is one of the main characters in Little Women, is extremely angry with her younger sister, Amy, because Amy birthed the book that Jo had been writing for over a year. Amy was miffed at Jo because Jo was supercilious to her and wouldn't take her along. So Jo swore never to talk to Amy again. Now, this grudge went on for quite a while, and Laurie, the boy next door who was a friend, and Jo went skating, and it was early spring, and they went skating on the river, and Amy tagged along. Laurie went out on the river and tested the ice and shouted back to Jo, don't go in the middle of the river because it's not safe. Now, Joe knew that Amy hadn't heard because she was way behind. But she did not relay the message because she had sworn to herself that she would never talk to her sister again. So Amy fell through the ice and almost drowned. And what I'm going to read to you is what happened when she finally was home, safe and sound and in bed. "Are you sure she is safe?" whispered Joe, looking remorsefully at the golden head which might have been swept away from her sight forever under the treacherous ice. "Quite safe, dear. She is not hurt and won't even take cold." That's Marmee speaking. "I think you were so sensible in covering and getting her home quickly," her mother replied. "Laurie did it all. I only let her go. Mother, if she should die, it would be my fault. It's my dreadful temper. I tried to cure it, I think I have, and then it breaks out worse than ever. What shall I do? What shall I do?" "Watch and pray, dear. Never get tired of trying, and never think it is impossible to conquer your fault. You don't know, you can't guess how bad it is. It seems as if I could do anything when I'm in a passion. I get so savage I could hurt anyone and enjoy it. I'm afraid I shall do something dreadful someday and spoil my life and make everybody hate me. Help me, do help me, Mother." "I will, my child, I will. Don't cry so bitterly. But remember this day and resolve with all your soul that you will never know another like it. Joe, dear, we all have our temptations, and it often takes us all our lives to conquer them. You think your temper is the worst in the world, but mine used to be just like it." "Yours, Mother. Why, you are never angry." And for the moment, Joe forgot remorse in surprise. "I've been trying to cure it for 40 years and have only succeeded in controlling it. I am angry nearly every day of my life. But I have learned not to show it, and I still hope to learn not to feel it, though it might take me another 40 years to do so." The patience and the humility of the face she loved so well was a better lesson to Joe than the wisest lecture, the sharpest reproof. She felt comforted at once by the sympathy and confidence given her. The knowledge that her mother had a fault like hers and tried to mend it made her own easier to bear and strengthened her resolution to cure it, though 40 years seemed rather a long time to watch and pray for a girl of 15. "Mother, are you angry when you fold your lips tight together and go out of the room sometimes?" "Yes. I've learned to check the hasty words that rise to my lips, and when I feel that they mean to break out against my will, I just go away a minute and give myself a little shake." "But how did you learn to keep still? That is what troubles me, for the sharp words fly out before I know what I'm about. And the more I say, the worse I get, till it's a pleasure to hurt people's feelings and say dreadful things. Tell me how you do it, Marmee dear." "My good mother used to help me, as you do us," interrupted Joe with a grateful kiss. "But I lost her when I was a little older than yourself, and for years I had to struggle alone, for I was too proud to confess my weakness to anyone else. I had a hard time, Joe, and shed a good many bitter tears over my failures, for in spite of my efforts, I never seemed to get on. Then your father came, and I was so happy that I found it easy to be good. But by and by, when I had 4 little daughters around me and we were poor, then the old trouble began again. For I am not patient by nature, and it tried me very much to see my children wanting anything." "Poor mother, what helped you then?" "Your father, Joe. He never loses patience." Oops. "He helped me and comforted me and showed me that I must try to practice all the virtues I would have my little girls possess, for I was their example. It was easier to try for your sakes than for my own. A startled or surprised look from one of you when I spoke sharply rebuked me more than any words could have done, and the love, respect, and confidence of my children was the sweetest reward I could receive for my efforts to be the woman I would have them copy." And so that's how Joe learned to tried to control her temper, and how my mother, Attila the Hun, tried to imitate all that was good in Marmee. So that's my reading for today.
Thank you, Sue. And our next speaker I never met until this evening. He is Director of Administration for Services for the town of Simsbury and has served since October 2010. He trained as a lawyer. He was a partner in firms in both Cleveland, Ohio and Chicago, Illinois. He also served as Executive Vice President of Human Resources for Telelabs in Naperville, Illinois. Connecticut native, so it was sort of a return of the native when Tom came back to Connecticut in the Midwest, from the Midwest in 2004, and co-founded Is It Voice or Voss? Voce, a professional choral arts ensemble shortly thereafter. Tom lives in West Hartford with his wife, Rosalind. They have 4 children, 3 working in New York and 1 in college at Northwestern University in Chicago. And Tom and I talked briefly on the telephone a little bit about his reading habits. And I could ask you yourself, but since I took all the trouble to make a card for this, I'm just going ahead with mine. Okay. Things that he liked Willpower by Kelly MacDonald. You should have met my granddaughter.
It sounds like it.
Yes, it would have gone on great together. Another favorite of his is Shunryu Suzuki, and he was the first Zen teacher that was popular in the United States circa the 1950s, and Tom tells me that he positively meditates every day, which I'm impressed with. I've tried and never been able to master it. And another one is, as a kid, he connected with Horatio Hornblower, which prepared him to be a big fan of Patrick O'Brien and the sea stories. Welcome, please, and please welcome Chris Doyle. No, you're right there with Warren. We are welcoming Thomas Cook.
Thank you. We still on? Yes. I'm the chances of getting minutes are slim to none, but I do need to say 2 things. One is, I thank you for the opportunity to do this. The Just So stories were read to me by my grandmother on the Brantford shores as a kid. Now, she was born well over a century ago in Salem, Massachusetts, and had a wonderful voice. You've taken me back to some of my best memories. The other thing I want to say is that I just want to echo Eunice's comments about Sue Bullock. We are losing a real visionary this year. We are so grateful to you, Sue, for everything you've done for this library. Thank you. The beginning of the Armadillos. This, O best beloved, is another story of the high and far-off times. In the very middle of those times was a stickly, prickly hedgehog, and he lived on the banks of the turbid Amazon, eating shelly snails and things. And he had a friend, a slow, solid tortoise, who lived on the banks of the turbid Amazon, eating green lettuces and things. And so that was all right, best beloved, do you see? But also, and at the same time, in those high and far-off times, there was a painted jaguar, and he lived on the banks of the turbid Amazon, too. And he ate everything that he could catch. When he could not catch deer or monkeys, he would eat frogs and beetles. And when he could not catch frogs and beetles, he went to his mother jaguar, and she told him how to eat hedgehogs and tortoises. She said to him ever so many times, graciously waving her tail, "My son, when you find a hedgehog, you must drop him into the water, and then he will uncoil. And when you catch a tortoise, you must scoop him out of his shell with your paw." And so that was all right, best beloved. One beautiful night on the banks of the turbid Amazon, painted jaguar found stickly, prickly hedgehog and slow, solid tortoise sitting under the trunk of a fallen tree. They could not run away, and so stickly, prickly curled himself up into a ball, because he was a hedgehog. And slow, solid tortoise drew in his head and feet into his shell as far as they would go, because he was a tortoise. And so that was all right, best beloved, do you see? Now attend to me, said Painted Jaguar, because this is very important. My mother said that when I meet a hedgehog, I am to drop him into the water, and then he will uncoil. And when I meet a tortoise, I'm to scoop him out of his shell with my paw. Now, which of you is hedgehog, and which is tortoise? Because to save my spots, I cannot tell. Are you sure of what your mummy told you? Said Stickly Prickly Hedgehog. Are you quite sure? Perhaps she said that when you uncoil a tortoise, you must shell him out of the water with a scoop. And when you paw a hedgehog, you must drop him on the shell. Are you sure of what your mummy told you? Said Slow and Solid Tortoise. Are you quite sure? Perhaps she said that when you water a hedgehog, you must drop him into your paw. And when you meet a tortoise, you must shell him until he uncoils. I don't think it was at all like that, said Painted Jaguar, but he felt a little puzzled. But please say it again more distinctly. When you scoop water with your paw, you uncoil it with a hedgehog, said Stickly Prickly. Remember that because it's important. But, said the tortoise, when you paw your meat, you drop it into a tortoise with a scoop. Why can't you understand? You are making my spots ache, said Painted Jaguar. And besides, I didn't want your advice at all. I only wanted to know which of you is hedgehog and which is tortoise. I shan't tell you, said Stickly Prickly, but you can scoop me out of my shell if you like. Aha, said Painted Jaguar. Now I know you're tortoise. You thought I wouldn't. Now I will. Painted Jaguar darted out his paddy paw just as Stickly Prickly curled himself up. And, of course, Jaguar's paddy paw was just filled with prickles. Worse than that, he knocked Stickly Prickly away and away into the woods and the bushes, where it was too dark to find him. Then he put his paddy paw into his mouth, and of course the prickles hurt him worse than ever. As soon as he could speak, he said, Now I know he isn't tortoise at all, but... And then he scratched his head with his unprickly paw. How do I know that this other is tortoise? But I am tortoise, said Slow and Solid. Your mother was quite right. She said that you were to scoop me out of my shell with your paw. Begin. You didn't say she said that a minute ago, said Painted Jaguar, sucking the prickles out of his paddy paw. You said she said something quite different. Well, suppose you say that I said that she said something quite different. I don't see that it makes any difference, because if she said what you said I said she said, it's just the same as if I said what she said she said. On the other hand, if you think she said that you were to uncoil me with a scoop, well, instead of pawing me into drops with a shell, I can't help that, can I? But you said you wanted to be scooped out of your shell with my paw, said Painted Jaguar. If you'll think again, you'll find that I didn't say anything of the kind. I said that your mother said that you were to scoop me out of my shell, said Slow and Solid. What'll happen if I do, said the Jaguar, most sniffly and most cautious. I don't know, because I've never been scooped out of my shell. But I tell you truly, if you want to see me swim away, you've only got to drop me in the water. I don't believe it, said Painted Jaguar. You've mixed up all the things my mother told me to do with the things that you asked me whether I was sure that she didn't say, till I don't know whether I'm on my head or my painted tail. And now you come and tell me something I can understand, and it makes me more mixy than before. My mother told me that I was to drop one of you two into the water, and as you seem so anxious to be dropped, I think you don't want to be dropped. So jump into the turbid Amazon and be quick about it. I warn you that your mummy won't be pleased. Don't tell her I didn't tell you, said Slow Solid. If you say another word about my mother, the Jaguar answered, but he had not finished the sentence before Slow and Solid quietly dived into the turbid Amazon, swam under the water for a long way, and came out on the bank where Stickly Prickly was waiting for him. That was a very narrow escape, said Stickly Prickly. I don't like Painted Jaguar. What did you tell him that you were? I told him truthfully that I was a truthful tortoise. But he wouldn't believe it, and he made me jump into the river to see if I was. And I was, and he is surprised. Now he's gone to tell his mummy. Listen to him. They could hear Painted Jaguar roaring up and down among the trees and the bushes by the side of the turbid Amazon till his mummy came. "Son, son," said his mother ever so many times, graciously waving her tail. "What have you been doing that you shouldn't have done?" "I tried to scoop something that it said it wanted to be scooped out of its shell with my paw, and my paw is full of prickles," said Painted Jaguar. "Son, son," said his mother ever so many times, graciously waving her tail. "By the prickles in your paddy paw, I see that that must have been a hedgehog. You should have dropped him into the water." "I did that to the other thing. And he said he was a tortoise, and I didn't believe him, and it was quite true. And he has dived under the turbid Amazon, and he won't come up again, and I haven't anything at all to eat, and I think we had better find lodging somewhere else. They are too clever on the turbid Amazon for poor me." "Son, son," said his mother ever so many times, graciously waving her tail. "Now attend to me and remember what I say. A hedgehog curls himself up into a ball, and his prickles stick out every which way at once. By this you may know the hedgehog." "I don't like this old lady one little bit," said Stickly Prickly, under the shadow of a large leaf. "I wonder what else she knows." "A tortoise can't curl himself up," Mother Jaguar went on, ever so many times, graciously waving her tail. "He only draws his head and legs into his shell. By this you may know the tortoise." "I don't like this old lady at all, said Slow and Solid Tortoise. "Even Painted Jaguar can't forget those directions. It's a great pity that you can't swim, Stickly Prickly." "Don't talk to me," said Stickly Prickly. "Just think how much better it would be if you could curl up. This is a mess. Listen to Painted Jaguar." Painted Jaguar was sitting on the banks of the turbid Amazon, sucking prickles out of his paws and saying to himself, "Can't curl but can't swim, Slow Solid, that's him. Curls up but can't swim, Stickly Prickly, that's him." "He'll never forget that this month of Sundays," said Stickly Prickly. "Hold up my chin, Slow and Solid. I'm going to try to learn to swim. It may be useful." "Excellent," said Slow and Solid, and he held up Stickly Prickly's chin while Stickly Prickly kicked in the waters of the turbid Amazon. "You'll make a fine swimmer yet," said Slow and Solid. "Now, if you can unlace my back plates a little, I'll see what I can do towards curling up. It may be useful." Stickly Prickly helped to unlace Tortoise's back plates, so that by twisting and straining, Slow and Solid actually managed to curl up a titty-wee bit. "Excellent," said Stickly Prickly, "but I shouldn't do any more just now. It's making you black in the face. Kindly lead me into the water once again, and I'll practice that side stroke you say is so easy." And so Stickly Prickly practiced, and Slow Solid swam alongside. "Excellent," said Slow and Solid. "A little more practice will make you a regular whale. Now, if I may trouble you to unlace my back and front plates 2 holes more, I'll try that fascinating bend that you say is so easy. Won't Painted Jaguar be surprised?" "Excellent," said Stickly Prickly, all wet from the turbid Amazon. "I declare I shouldn't know you from one of my own family. 2 holes, I think you said. A little more expression, please. And don't grunt quite so much, or Painted Jaguar may hear us. When you've finished, I want to try the long dive, which you say is so easy. Won't Painted Jaguar be surprised?" And so Stickly Prickly dived, and Slow and Solid dived alongside. They went on with their exercises, each helping the other till morning came. And when the sun was high, they rested and dried themselves. Then they saw that they were both of them quite different from what they had been. "Stickly Prickly," said Tortoise, after breakfast, "I am not what I was yesterday, but I think that I may yet amuse Painted Jaguar." "That was the very thing I was thinking just now," said Stickly Prickly. "I think scales are a tremendous improvement on prickles, to say nothing of being able to swim. Oh, won't Painted Jaguar be surprised? Let's go and find him." By and by, they found Painted Jaguar still nursing his paddy paw that had been hurt the night before. He was so astonished that he fell 3 times backward over his own painted tail without stopping. "Good morning," said Stickly Prickly. "And how is your dear gracious mummy this morning?" She's quite well, thank you, said Painted Jaguar, but you must forgive me if I do not at this precise moment recall your name. That's unkind of you, said Stickly Prickly, seeing that this time yesterday you tried to scoop me out of my shell with your paw. But you hadn't any shell. It was all prickles, said Painted Jaguar. I know it was. Just look at my paw. You told me to drop into the turbid Amazon and be drowned, said Slow Solid. Why are you so rude and forgetful today? Don't you remember what your mother told you, said Stickly Prickly. Can't curl but can swim, Stickly Prickly, that's him. Curls up but can't swim, Slow Solid, that's him. Then they both curled themselves up and rolled round and round Painted Jaguar till his eyes turned truly cartwheels in his head. Then he went to fetch his mother. Mother, he said, there are 2 new animals in the woods today, and the one that you said couldn't swim, swims, and the one that you said couldn't curl up, curls. And they've gone shares in their prickles, I think, because both of them are scaly all over instead of one being smooth and the other very prickly. And besides that, they rolled around and round in circles, and I don't feel comfy. Son, son, said Mother Jaguar, ever so many times, graciously waving her tail. A hedgehog is a hedgehog and can't be anything but a hedgehog. And a tortoise is a tortoise and can never be anything else. But it isn't a hedgehog and it isn't a tortoise. It's a little bit of both, and I don't know its proper name. Nonsense, said Mother Jaguar. Everything has its proper name. I should call it Armadillo till I found out the real one. And I should leave it alone. So Painted Jaguar did as he was told, especially about leaving them alone. But the curious thing is that from that day to this, oh best beloved, no one on the banks of the turbid Amazon has ever called Stickly Prickly and Slow Solid anything except Armadillo. There are hedgehogs and tortoises in other places, of course. There are some in my garden. But the real old and clever kind, with their scales lying lippity-lappity one over the other, like pinecone scales, that lived on the banks of the turbid Amazon in the high and far-off days, are always called armadillos, because they were so clever. So that's all right, best beloved, do you see? Thank you.
And our next guest is Chris Doyle. Chris and Doyle. I've got it right. Chris Doyle. And Chris Doyle has spent a good part of the last 25 years currently directs a global studies program at the Watkinson School in Hartford. His teaching has been featured in the New York Times. It has also been featured in the Hartford Current, and he's been on Colin McEnroe's show on WNPR. Chris holds a PhD in guess what? Want to take a chance? History. In history, and has published essays in academic history journals, Education Week, The American Educator, the Hartford Current, and in several books about teaching. He lives in Simsbury with his wife Bev and son, Lee, who's a junior at Simsbury High, and his daughter Emma is finishing a history degree at Royal Holloway at the University of London. Reading is in the genes in his family because his daughter, the one that is now getting her degree in London, was a reader when she was in high school many, many years ago. I asked Chris what he's reading these days. Among his books was Crisis, What Crisis by Turner, Teacher, The One Who Made the Decision by Mark Edmondson, and Chris is going to be reading one of his own essays that appeared in a collection called Burned In, Fueling the Fire to Teach. Please welcome Chris Doyle.
50% of teachers who enter the profession leave the profession completely within 5 years. And a young friend of mine was looking around the teacher's room at Farmington High School when we both used to work there. He was really discouraged by this. His name was Luke Reynolds. And he wanted to put a book together by and about people who'd beaten those odds. He asked me to contribute an essay. I'm going to read an excerpt about my first year of teaching. It's very painful to think about that. The essay is called "It's Not on the Test, A Search for Existential Meaning in 3 Acts." I'm going to read Act 1. 1985. 3 years out of college, I was clueless. By default, I'd taken my father's advice and gotten a job in sales. To be precise, selling carpet to guys who owned Persian rug shops in Washington, D.C. I bought a Porsche and developed an extravagant habit of going out to nightclubs 4 or 5 nights a week. I chatted up girls, worked out at the gym, and met other people my age doing more or less the same. Some of them even liked it. Exiting a dance club one night, maybe it was early morning, I swear the place was called Posers. I walked up Wisconsin Avenue in Georgetown and fumbled for my car keys as it started raining. The wind kicked up from the Potomac and blew garbage out of the gutter. Some of it stuck to me. Over the next couple of days, I called my former college advisor, put in a rare appearance at church, and phoned my parents to tell them I was thinking of becoming a teacher. My dad said I was crazy for turning my back on a well-paying job, but my old professor was encouraging and mentioned that I didn't need a certificate to teach in private schools. The priest I bumped into after Mass that day helped also. I ended up taking the priest to lunch, not something my 24-year-old self had ever imagined doing before. Over coffee, I gave him a brief story of my life, told him I wanted to do something worthwhile, and confessed to a fear I'd end up married, a father, and trapped in a job I hated, an angry breadwinner. "Maybe you've got a calling to be a teacher, Chris," the priest said. He knew about callings. "In any case, there's nothing wrong with wanting to live your own life." That line stayed with me. 6 months later, I was back in Connecticut, my home state, driving my Porsche with a for sale sign in the back window to my $13,000 a year high school teaching job. Catholic high school teaching job. I'd return each afternoon to the 3rd floor walk-up I shared with a law student, run, grab dinner, and trudge up the hill past the state capitol building, offices, and Bushnell Hall to the Hartford Public Library on Main Street. There, I would spend 2 to 4 hours most nights grading papers and planning desperately to stay 1 class period ahead of my students. Teaching U.S. history wasn't too bad. At least I knew something about it. But psychology was brutal. Everything I remembered from Psych 1 spilled out the first day of school, with time to spare. And then I improvised with, "Why don't we all introduce ourselves?" My history degree allegedly qualified me to teach everything from edible complexes to microeconomics in the Marbury versus Madison case. I had a lot to learn before I could teach anything passably well. I checked out histories of psychology, textbooks, Freud's works and Jung's, the behaviorist books on human development and personality, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, case studies of mental illnesses, and depictions of famous experiments from Pavlov to Milgram. I usually selected a work or two of history as well, to bone up on whatever I happened to be teaching at the moment in my U.S. history classes. The librarians were saints. They helped me and all the other patrons, including the homeless people who frequented the city library on cold evenings. Some of those homeless were remarkably well read. Seeing someone down on his luck poring over Finnegan's Wake contributed to the great humbling I experienced all year. My college degree didn't mean I knew anything. Certainly not about living on the streets, or James Joyce, or even the subjects I taught. In the stacks, I felt like a novice penitent working on my faith alongside other disciples whose poverty lent them a gravity and conviction far beyond my own. I lived within walking distance of 4 great libraries and used them all: the Public, Trinity College, UConn Law School, and the Connecticut State Library. I'd chosen to live in Hartford under the greatly mistaken impression that it might offer a Georgetown on the cheap social life. I was an idiot, right? Yeah. The dearth of downscale DC-like partying was offset by the lucky accident of getting a fine means of self-education at my doorstep. Still, I wasn't good in the classroom that first year. My students were patient. One or two were brilliant and put my own high school self to shame. I sometimes read aloud in class from books I enjoyed, which kids liked, but I didn't ask nearly enough questions, didn't let them run things, debate, role play, define their own research problems, teach lessons, or have a say about class organization and content. I spent mind-numbing hours writing comments on their essays, which they seemed rarely to read. The grade, I guess, was what they noticed. Broke, I used the school's weight room instead of a health club, and in the process got better acquainted with some students who were gym rats. Two of them could have been stand-up comics. We laughed a lot. I heard from another one day about his parents' divorce. Reagan was president, and he had yet to be invented as an iconic savior by the right. The gym rats and I dismissed him as a lightweight. We debated the history of the Cold War, the decline of the West, and whether the assistant principal was a complete jerk, as they swore he was. These conversations were richer than anything I got in class that year. I lived on macaroni and cheese, peanut butter and jelly, and cafeteria lunches. I heard there might be layoffs before the next year, which turned out to be true and cost me my job. So in the spring, I started classes toward public school certification. The Porsche went, replaced by an oil-guzzling, rusty Pontiac. I lived more frugally than I ever had and was busier and more tired than ever. To an acquaintance, the teaching life seemed to come down from my carpet-selling Georgetown days. My Pontiac sucked, she told me. My social sphere had contracted too. I was making less than a third of my previous salary, living in a marginal neighborhood, and my relationship with my parents was strained. It also felt frustrating to keep hitting my limits as a teacher. Yet what I was doing felt pure. Teaching became my existential answer. It would be a lie to say it was for my students' sakes. It was about me. It would also be false to claim that I had a calling to teach. I was not a natural, and the few talents I did have required lots of cultivation. I was eager to keep cultivating, though. The subjects I taught probed the roots of humanity and suggested larger truths. No cloistered monk. Nonetheless, I was looking for something deep in those libraries. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Chris Doyle. Okay, we're at the halfway point. All right, our next guest. I did not meet him until this evening, but talking to him on the phone, I couldn't wait to meet him. If you're a sucker for a cut glass British accent, you're going to adore the next guest. From the land of the Mayflower, Elton John, James Bond, and Hugh Grant comes Simsbury's latest import, known as the Velvet Piano Player. He's known for his luxuriously elegant and entertaining approach to all styles of popular music. You probably heard him at Eden Memorial during the Simsbury Celebrates, or at the First Church during the Cornerstone concert series, or maybe right here in the library during one of our concert series. This newly established personality brings a uniquely international flavor to this special event. I asked him the piece that he's doing from Kipling, the second Kipling entry tonight. I was not familiar with it. I said, can you tell me about it? I don't want to. I want to surprise everybody. And then he said, all you have to do is tell your audience that I'm going to transport you from Simsbury, Connecticut, and drop you right in the middle of Downton Abbey. So that sounded good to me. So I bring you John English.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for having me here this evening. This is the second time I've been at Simsbury Library at the invitation of Sue, and it's wonderful to hear so many American accents. And as the purpose of conveying a message, just to make it clear, I've been reminded to slow down and enunciate very clearly. I've got the written piece right here. It's actually a poem by Rudyard Kipling called The Glory of the Garden. And this was often misquoted by my father as I was growing up, but I was led to believe it was some work of considerable note. And now, on rereading it many times, it really does seem to be the case. I don't know much about Rudyard Kipling. I know he's written some pretty darn good stuff, and that's an understatement. But the misquotations of my father are really quite amusing to read now, but he would often speak of this. And I think the connection with the fact that I was his slave in the garden growing up adds a little richness to my own memory of this. In fact, I remember being castigated for breaking just about every garden tool we had, and thinking this was very unfair as I had the removal of my pocket money as a punishment. This usually occurred before I actually received it, which made it all the more painful until I realized when I finally matured, which is still a process ongoing, that I broke them because I got to use them more than anybody else, whether I wanted to or not. The written piece is actually not terribly long, so it's only a couple of minutes. So as I was very graciously introduced, perhaps I may play you a piece of music first that might help set the scene. For those of you that are PBS fans who have heard of Downton Abbey, this is a piece that you'll probably recognize, but may not have ever heard actually performed, either on the radio or live in any way, because I haven't heard it performed or seen it performed. It just comes with the program. So if I may digress from the written bit just for a moment, and as the introduction said, plop you in the world, the visual world, for those of you that have seen it, of Downton Abbey, which is the landscape for the poem that follows, and it has something to do with gardening. So if those of you who've seen the program can conjure up this image while you hear the piece of music shortly played, I shall get back to the Rudyard Kipling in just a moment. Thank you very much indeed. And now to the actual star of the presentation, the poem, The Glory of the Garden, which if, as I said, you've any familiarity with the Downton Abbey programme, one of the stars of the programme is the beautiful landscape in which the television programme takes place. And it was often, as I said, my father's wish to send me out into the big wide world with tools to do all the hard work so he could later on claim the credit. And Rudyard Kipling was one of those who wrote mostly about the angst between the famed British classes, those that actually did the work and those who owned those who did the work. So here we go, The Glory of the Garden. Oh, some glasses would be a good idea too. Our England is a garden that is full of stately views, of borders, beds and shrubberies, and lawns and avenues, with statues on the terraces and peacocks strutting by. But the glory of the garden lies in more than meets the eye. For where the old thick laurels grow along the thin red wall, you'll find the tool and potting sheds, which are the heart of all. The cold frames and the hothouses, the dung pits and the tanks, the rollers, carts and drain pipes, with the barrows and the planks. And there you'll see the gardeners, the men and prentice boys, told off to do as they are bid, and do it without noise. For except when seeds are planted and we shout to scare the birds, the glory of the garden, it abideth not in words. And some can pot begonias, and some can bud a rose, and some are hardly fit to trust with anything that grows. But they can roll and trim the lawns and sift the sand and loam, for the glory of the garden occupieth all who come. Our England is a garden, and such gardens are not made by singing, "Oh, how beautiful," and sitting in the shade. While better men than we go out and start their working lives at grubbing weeds from gravel paths with broken dinner knives. There's not a pair of legs so thin, there's not a head so thick, there's not a hand so weak and white, nor yet a heart so sick. But it can find some needful job that's crying to be done, for the glory of the garden glorifieth everyone. Then seek your job with thankfulness and work till further orders, if it's only netting strawberries or killing slugs on borders. And when your back stops aching and your hands begin to harden, you will find yourself a partner in the glory of the garden. O Adam was a gardener, and God who made him sees that half a proper gardener's work is done upon his knees. So when your work is finished, you can wash your hands and pray for the glory of the garden, that it may not pass away. And the glory of the garden, it shall never pass away.
Let's face it, we like that accent. We do. We do. Our next guest is Vice President of the Pinnacle Investment Management in Simsbury, Connecticut. Jeff is a certified financial planner, an MBA, and is a two-time recipient of Connecticut Magazine's 5-Star Wealth Managers Award. He is currently president of the Connecticut Valley chapter of the Financial Planning Association, past board member of the Simsbury Chamber of Commerce, and an active member and past president of the Simsbury Granbury Rotary Club. Jeff and his wife Jenny moved to Simsbury in 2003 with their kids Jason and Katie. Their son Jason is a sophomore at Simsbury High, and their daughter Katie is an 8th grader at Henry James Memorial School. And I would like to welcome Jeff Feuting, please, to the stand. We talked a little bit about reading. I know that Rotarianism played a huge role in his family. It was very important also as a father. And if I'm not mistaken, didn't we talk about The Hobbit? No. We talked about The Hobbit. He was lost in his teenage years in that middle world. Okay. Please welcome Jeff.
Thank you. All right. Right. All right. Well, what a tough act to follow. Next time I think I'd rather be first. That was fantastic. Okay, I'm going to...
Play the piano.
You don't want me to play the piano. Okay, I'm going to read to you a little bit tonight from a book here, and it's called A Century of Service, and it's the story of Rotary International. Rotary is an organization that's very dear to me. As Eunice mentioned, I've been involved in the club here for a long time, and my dad's been involved in the club back in our hometown back in Ohio for longer than that. It's one of those things that it kind of runs in the family. Rotary is a fantastic organization with significant contributions to local communities as well as major impacts on a global scale. Local Rotary builds playgrounds, gives scholarships, helps stock the food bank and the fuel assistance programs. Globally, Rotary helps with disaster recovery, polio eradication, and works to provide clean water to impoverished communities around the world. I hope my reading inspires you to seek out and read the book, to learn more about Rotary, and maybe reach out to a local Rotarian and be our guest at one of our weekly meetings. So this is the story about Paul Harris, who's the one that founded Rotary back in 1905. That's the topic of the book overall. I'm going to read a little bit from the introduction. Even the world's mightiest rivers have humble beginnings. They start as tiny springs, bubbling to the surface, or as a single melting snowdrop. As the rivulet trickles down, it brings new life to everything it touches. Soon, other tiny streams join its path, and together they unite as a river, even more confident and forceful. Over 100 years ago, the river called Rotary was born. A lawyer named Paul Harris called together 3 business associates for an evening meeting. They shared similar backgrounds and missed the friendliness and trustworthiness of dealing with people they knew. That night, they decided to form a club where they could meet and deal with one another in friendship and trust. It was the spring that started the mighty river. Soon service to their community, their customers, their employees, their children gathered much momentum, so much momentum that Rotary became known as the first service club. This book is this book is a word picture of the founder of Rotary and an introduction to some of the unsung heroes who have contributed to the river's flow. For, as with many famous waterways whose names are universally recognized, the tributaries that feed them often go unknown. Some of those men and women are small rivers in their own right. Others were but a few raindrops. They contributed their time, talents, and thoughts not for personal recognition or financial gain, but because they became swept up in the torrent of service. Rotary's motto is service above self. As Mother Teresa wrote in Words to Love By, the whole work is only a drop in the ocean, but if I didn't put the drop in, the ocean would be one drop less. Some characteristics continue to be the organization's hallmarks: tolerance, high ethical standards, fellowship among members, commitment to community service, especially towards children. World Peace have engaged the time and efforts of Rotary volunteers since the first club was founded, and they continue to do so today. The book cannot possibly tell of every contribution that clubs have made and does not pretend to be a compendium of projects. As Rotary, the pioneer of all service organizations, celebrated its centennial, it has over 1.2 million men and women members in more than 34,200 clubs in 165 countries around the globe. They comprise a dedicated army of humanitarian volunteers, the likes of which the world has never seen, often accomplishing beneficial deeds that otherwise might never have been done. It's a force for world peace and arguably the most effective non-governmental agency ever to bring relief from human suffering and eradicate disease on a global scale. The following pages tell the stories that prove how one person can make a difference in the world. This book will help demonstrate time and again Rotary has given well-intentioned individuals the forum to do things that no one person could have accomplished alone. The pages introduce you to those people who meet each week at the local Rotary meetings and discover why they feel compelled to give so generously and enthusiastically of their time. They will take you into inner-city job training centers and remote villages for polio immunization days, all to see the Rotary service ideal in action. This book will tell of lives saved, lives changed, life given by small groups of Rotarians who still come together as Paul Harris convened that first meeting in 1905. The Rotary River is wide and runs deep. No one can know where its journey will take it, but all who gaze upon these waters can be proud of its source. It grows ever stronger because it offers men and women something they yearn for: the desire to help others, the determination to make a difference. Thank you.
I've left a very messy board here for everybody. I'll clean it up just a little bit here. And we will go on to our next to last speaker, and it's Bill Hildebrand. And the only thing I know is when it started, people said to me when they saw the poster up there, they said, well, you know Bill Hildebrand. I said, no, I don't know Bill Hildebrand. I said, of course you know Bill Hildebrand. I said, I don't know Bill Hildebrand. I said, everybody knows Bill Hildebrand. Well, I talked to Bill on the phone, and I can see why just about everybody knows Bill Hildebrand. You are in for a treat. Bill Hildebrand, who doesn't mind admitting that he's 86, refers to himself as a jack of many trades, master of a couple. He is a letterpress printer, author, writer of parodies and parables, publisher, songwriter, banjo, kazoo, and watchboard player, ex-biker and hiking enthusiast, ex-gardener. I think sneaking in things is not. That's not good. No. Amateur photographer, calligrapher, electrical mechanical engineer, inventor, teacher, lecturer, and in his own words, general nuisance. He told me a story that I just loved on the phone. He was telling me that when he was in college, that the college had a psychological test that they gave to all freshmen. And it was to see how they were going to fare in the next 4 years. The 4 years go by, and they call in Bill, and they say to him that he has big, big problems in the future. And he wants to know what the problems are, and they simply say, you just have too many aptitudes. And he's now willing to admit that he does. I asked, as I asked all of our speakers, what they were reading. Now, would a gentleman like this have one book? No. He said he would have to call me back. He gave me a list that just went on and on and on. They include any and all of the spy novels by John le Carré, Mind's Eye by Douglas Hofstadter, all the Arthur Conan Doyle stories, The Wonderful and Weird House of Leaves by Mark Z. Daniel E. Yuski. And there you have it. He gave me a lot more books, but I'm going to let you tell me about them all. I give you the wonderful Bill Hildebrand. And hooked up to this. Yep.
Yeah, take
there
that
we
away
go.
from you. No, don't believe a word she said.
Where would I have got the information from?
Okay. Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Very good. Okay. Anyhow, tonight I'm going to read from this book of lyrics which I wrote as calligraphic parodies. Pardon?
You need the mic.
You think so? Okay. How about that? All right. All right. We'll start at the beginning. Tonight I'm going to read this book of lyrics which I wrote as calligraphic parodies. And these were the result of singing one of these parodies each year at the International Assembly of Lettering Artists while I attended, which I attended and was still a calligrapher. There, in this little book has 570 songs which I wrote, not the songs, but the texts that go with them, the lyrics. And this one is a song. It's called The Song of the Scribe. It was printed in 1987. And the one, sorry about that. The one I'm going to read you tonight is called Ghostwriters. I was working in my garden. Oh, no, sorry. I was listening to the last fellow. I was working in my studio one dark and stormy night. I looked out of the window and saw a most unearthly sight. From out behind the clouds there came a golden quill, I swear. It was writing letters in the sky, or writing in the air. I opened up my window and I gazed upon that sight, these ancient letters written across the sky so late at night. And as I watched, I thought I heard a voice from up above. It said, "Don't you be afraid, my son. Those letters spill out love." The writing stopped, the voice went on, so clear and yet so low. It said, I was once a scribe like you down on the earth below, but I am now a spirit, yes, a ghost that will not die, in this great scriptorium way up here in the sky. The writing stopped, the voice went on so clear and yet so low. It said, I was once a scribe like you down on the earth below, but I am now a spirit, yes, a ghost that will not die, in this great scriptorium way up here in the sky. The scribes of ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, and Rome still write. They form these letters in their golden quills most every night. Oh, Alcuin and Arrighi, even Edward Johnston, too, write messages of peace and love to scribes below like you. You have the power of your hand. You have the power in your hand, the power of your pen, to spread the word of love below again and yet again. Oh, use your pen I'm sorry, this is slipping. Use your pen for something more than you earning coins of gold, and help unite the world below into one living fold. The voice had stopped. The sky went dark. I went back to my room. I sat there at my drawing board in the dark and gathering gloom. And then I lifted up my pen and wrote the words that you now hear. I was trying to do what I was told that night so loud and clear. So when you have the opportunity, don't let it pass. Help spread the word of love and peace to every lad and lass. The power of your pen is greater than the sword of hate. When the golden letters come to you, please don't hesitate. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, absolutely charming.
What?
That was charming.
Okay.
Lovely. And we come to our last speaker of the evening. And my son Chris is here, and our 14-year-old granddaughter, who's about to turn 15, is a freshman at Simsbury High School. And Chris, the next time that Brenna says to you, Dad, I can't do anything, I don't have time, I got so much schoolwork, I want you to mention just one name, Laura Yablecki. Laura Yablecki is a senior at Simsbury High School. Laura is, and I could manage this without the glasses, but I'm not going to show off. Laura is a senior at Simsbury High School, where she is captain of the varsity volleyball and the hockey teams. She helped organize the Chuck-a-Puck fundraiser for the hockey team. She was involved in the selection of the high school's athletic director. She tutors math, and she is a member of the National Honor Society. She was named by the Valley Press as one of our community youth leaders. I asked her what she was reading these days, because it's so hard with all the work that's assigned to you in the school, and she just got through reading The Help, which she was absolutely charmed with. And she felt, for those of us who lived through the civil rights movement, it's interesting to know that somebody, a senior in high school, that's ancient history. That's a world you didn't encounter and a culture you're just meeting anew. So please welcome the youngest member of our speakers tonight, Laura Yablecki.
Hello. As Eunice mentioned, sports have been a huge part of my life for the past 17 years. There's almost never a time when I'm not playing, watching, or talking about sports. But there's something beyond the obvious physical and social benefits of sports that attract me to them. As Nelson Mandela once stated, sports has the power to change the world. It has the power to unite in a way that little else does. It speaks to youth in a language they understand. Sport can create hope where once there was only despair. When the 1980 Winter Olympics arrived in Lake Placid, New York, America was certainly full of despair. The Cold War continued on as tensions between the U.S. and the Soviet Union intensified. A general feeling of instability and insecurity overcame the nation. Uncertainty became the new norm. The Soviet Union, already dominating politics, was expected to dominate the men's hockey tournament and bring home the 5th gold medal in a row. Their team was led by legends and was filled to the brim with world-class athletes. The American team, on the other hand, was composed of a haphazard group of college players and was set up to fail. The Soviets breezed by the Americans in the exhibition games, skating to a 10-3 victory right before the Olympics started. No one expected the inexperienced Americans to advance past the first round of group play. Despite these odds, the American team advanced to play the Soviet Union in the middle round. Still, they were set up to fail. Before this game, head coach Herb Brooks gave an incredibly inspiring and powerful speech to his team, motivating them in their 4-2 defeat of the Soviet Union. While no one outside of the team heard the speech at the time, it has since been documented extensively, most notably in the 2004 film Miracle. Many people remember where they were and who they were with when the Americans finally won, sending them to the gold medal game where they eventually beat Finland 4-2. Ranked the best moment in 20th century sports by Sports Illustrated, Miracle on Ice sparked a renewal of American patriotism and pride. The win created hope where once there was only despair. Every team I've ever been on has at one point or another recited Herb Brooks' speech before a big game. If Brooks' words were powerful enough to unite a whole country, they should work wonders on a couple of kids, and they have. Now I will recite it one more time. Great moments are born from great opportunity, and that's what you have here tonight, boys. That's what you've earned here tonight. One game. If we played them 10 times, they might win 9, but not this game. Not tonight. Tonight we skate with them, tonight we stay with them, and we shut them down because we can. Tonight, we are the greatest hockey team in the world. You were born to be hockey players, every one of you. And you were meant to be here tonight. This is your time. Their time's done. It's over. I'm sick and tired of hearing about what a great hockey team the Soviets have. Screw them. This is your time. Now go out there and take it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You know, I remember that night so well. We were in New York. We were celebrating my birthday the night of that game, and I thought since it was my birthday, we could do the kinds of things that I like to do, which was to go to the theater. When Bud heard we were going to the theater, rather than staying in the hotel room and watching that hockey game, it was the grumpiest theater. He hated the show. He hated the night. We walk out onto the street, and the game is just over. It's the best night I can ever remember. It was better than New Year's Eve in New York. I mean, people were dancing in the street. The cab drivers were doing their horns. I danced with the wino on the street. It was wonderful. It was one of the great nights in American sports. It was just a lovely evening. We are all through, but there's a litany of thanks. And first of all, to all the friends who were involved tonight, to Sue Bullock, to Judy Knight, Beb Mangle, Nancy Donnenberg, Sandy McGee, Charmaine Glue, Alan Bugbee, who was both a volunteer and a reader, and of course to Nancy Bugbee, who was the producer, the director, and the casting director of A Night of 1,000 Stars. A thank you to all of our stars tonight. I'm just going to run through to tell you that I really do have these names straight now. Alan Bugbee, Sue Bullock, Thomas Cooke, Chris Doyle, Jeff Uding, Bill Hildebrand, John England, and Laura Yablecki. And, of course, a great big thank you to everybody who came tonight. I know there's so many things, conflicting things that are out there tonight, that you chose to come here. We thank you greatly. And I'm sure our stars thank you too, because without your reports, how would they ever know they were really, truly old stars? Thank you. Please have some dessert and stay for a while.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.